Magda, are you there? Hey.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can. Dr. Kim said that things were just really glitchy today.
Yeah, suddenly everything was gone. And I called back in 3 times and got a busy signal each time. And then I let a little time go by, and and then I called again, and then everything was working. So I don't know what's going on.
I'm glad you're here. Let me check and see if Michael's having any issues getting in. And,
okay.
We'll go from here. Are you having any trouble getting in? The switchboards and chat room's kind of acting funny, so
try again.
He's going to try again. Such fun.
Oh, when it works, it's pretty marvelous.
It is. It really is, and we are thankful for it. I did write them the other day because the chat room wasn't working, and they said, yeah, they were aware of the issues, so I'm hoping that they still know that there are issues. I'll write them again. So anyway, Michael still hasn't gotten in. So
were you and Michael able to get together with Aria Rain yesterday? Or is it today?
We were. No, we got with her yesterday, and it was a full day, and she was like bouncing off the wall, and didn't get to go into a great detail with her about what she said to her grandparents. However, she experienced, we took her to Hands-On Museum, which is a dinosaur museum. My daughter-in-law gave us a Christmas present of a year membership to get in there with her. And so we took advantage of it. We hadn't had her in a few days. So when we were there, and she was working on Hands-On, it's a museum where they can touch everything, so it's really nice. That's why it's called Hands-On. But it's got one section that's all dinosaurs. But yesterday she was in this area where you could take, cotton balls and popsicle sticks and all these different tools and glue them together or rubber band them together or whatever and make things. And so she was doing that, and this other little girl joined us at the table, and she was younger than Aria. And so Aria looked at her and said, "Hi, little girl, what are you making?" And the little girl, she was like 2.5 or 3, so she was younger than Aria. And she looked at her and in the hatefulest voice said, "I'm not a little girl." And Aria said, "Oh, I was just talking to you." So, then she quit talking to her after that, But so it gave an opportunity to say, we need to be nice to everybody and, use kind voice. And I said, you see, that doesn't feel good when somebody uses a harsh tone with you, and she just didn't know better. I said, but we know better, so we know to use a kind, gentle voice. And so we did have an opportunity to talk to her a little bit.
I'm in.
And, okay. Michael says he's in. You're not showing up on the switchboard, so I'm glad you're there. So we didn't get an opportunity to really go into detail talking to her about how she spoke to her other grandparents on Christmas Day, but she will remember this conversation because it was like, she just looked at the little girl, and it was like, I was just talking to you.
Right. Where did that come from? Why are you attacking me with your voice?
Yeah. So she will remember that.
Important. That's so important because so many people are not aware of how their voice expresses. Well,
sounds like pop going off somewhere.
It does. Yeah.
It's really weird. Dr. Tim said they've had glitches the entire time. Said it's just been really crazy. And the chat room's not working, so I'm going to write a note to the support team. So I will leave you talking with Magda while I do that.
Okay, sweet. So you were talking about our little one.
Yes, I was wondering if you had that conversation with her yet about her interaction with her other grandparents. Yeah.
See, we've only had her one day since yesterday, and actually I had an appointment, and I went and picked her up at school. It's the first time I've done that since she started school, and then picked Jeanie up, and we headed out to some friends got a gift subscription for the local dinosaur museum. There's actually a property here where they were building a highway and found some bones, and they built a museum, and she loves to go there. So we ended up doing that yesterday. So no, we didn't get to that conversation. It looks like it's going to be next week because we're not going to see her again until next week. I'm ready to...
Michael, it sounds like it had a good start because that little girl addressed her with such an angry tone of voice, and Aria definitely had a reaction to that. So it's a wonderful opportunity to open that conversation about how we use our voice, that it isn't just the words that we say, but how we sound when we say them. That makes a big difference. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a perfect opening. And I hadn't thought of it that way, so thank you for pointing that out, because it is the perfect opening to that whole conversation.
Indeed. And it's kind of fun for a child. Little ones like to make believe, and so, you could practice with her around saying a certain group of words, whatever you or she chooses, and then saying them with different kinds of intensity.
Intonation.
Yeah.
We can actually use Sean as an example because, most of the time, if there's something mischievous going on, Sean's the one that does it. It's the puppet on the end of her hand, And yesterday we were playing...
Go ahead, sweetie.
They have this big, huge sandbox, and if you pile the sand up like a mountain, it has some kind of a light shining on it. I don't know how they do it, and so the mountain will be green, and if you pile it higher like a volcano, it turns red, and you can put your hand over it, and it turns into like rain on it and stuff like that, and the low areas become the ocean, and she loves playing in that. And so we were playing, and I said something about Sean, and she goes, Sean doesn't come with me every day. And it's her hand.
She left Sean at home. She left Sean at home. So it wasn't, I had to maybe mention, maybe Sean was doing that. She said, I left Sean at home today.
I love it. That is so cute. But that's a great idea because she has Sean. She's already invented this other personality. So, it could be like, how would Sean say it if he was really angry with you? Or, how would Sean, rather than her having to do it? I don't know. Whatever works. But it can be a lot of fun.
Definitely. And her ability to imagine, if there's something that we're talking about and I offer it and, she wants it to be in the real world, I'll just say, that was just our imagination. She'll just go, okay. Just go right along with it. Okay, thank you, I got it. I don't have to go downstairs and get it or whatever if I move to that conversation. So the imagination is just amazing, and that's something that I really want to support her keeping. I think that too soon they're introduced into what's called the real world, and a lot of that gets lost. We've actually been watching a new TV series, and it's got some pretty crass stuff in it, and something I've been rolling over in my brain since we started watching it a few nights ago. Is how do we protect her innocence from getting lost in the kind of insanity that this TV show presents? It's, this is just normal life. This is just the way everybody's this way. And it's like, oh man,
What is the show, Michael?
In the Dark.
In the Dark.
And it's a woman who's mid-20s kind of. Have you seen it or touched into it?
Yeah, we stopped watching it because of her personality being so nasty. And we were enjoying it. Pardon?
I've considered saying, we really don't need to watch this anymore. Although, it's bringing some stuff up, so breathe and let it move when it moves. But
right.
But imagine I'm thinking about her being 4 and just what kind of impact that kind of crassness brings to a child that is that innocent, and how do we? I've been really working with how do we teach her how to, play jujitsu with that one to be able to flip it, because she's going to encounter it in the world, to flip it so that she maintains her innocence and understands that she doesn't need to get involved in a lot of the craziness of that thing. Right.
One way, of course, is to prevent her from watching that stuff, right? But as you say, she is going to, at some point in time, come across this. And so another very effective thing to do, and I think you already do this a lot, is to discuss what's happening with and if you're watching it on a server where you can stop it and start it again, is that's the situation, right? You can actually stop the show and then
in front of her.
we wouldn't put her in front of that at this stage. It's just as we've been watching it and processing through it, we look at each other like, holy mackerel, what kind of just. But the fact that it makes so much of it look normal, that's what I've been playing with my mind, is how to support Aria at 4, coming into an age where she's going to be exposed to, that kind of craziness. So,
you're
so as a teacher, I'd be delighted to have any input you have.
Well, the only thing
having worked with introducing a lot of things to those little ones. Pardon me, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe we lost each other there. It really is to continue doing what you're doing so beautifully, which is to point out that for some people, that is their normal way of acting and talking and being. But you don't have to be that way, and not everyone is that way. And they may or may not be happy, but you can choose how you want to act and what gives you happiness and joy. So I think it's really just seizing the teachable moment, when it comes up.
Yes.
And it will, especially now that she's in school.
She had, I'm not sure how she got her teacher to do it, but day before yesterday, Ryan and Gabby's next door neighbor have a child who is a year younger than Aria. And he just started at the same school day before yesterday. Of course, he's in the 3-year-old class, and Aria's in the 4-year-old class. And Aria talked her teacher into letting her go. She said, I need to go check on Dom and make sure that he's okay. Oh, I love it. So she went to the 3-year-old class to make sure that Dominic was doing okay, and then she went back to class.
That kind of tenderness and consideration is a wonderful teachable moment for every other kid in that class. I hope the teacher used it.
For sure. She has such compassion.
Yeah. That's fair.
And then that TV series, have you ever watched the series House?
I had tried it.
Medical Doctor.
Times. Yeah, I gave up on that for the same reason. He was just nasty.
Well, I suspect that character and her way of behaving, some of the even physical motion she does is exactly House. I suspect it's modeled on that. It was a very successful TV series with a male character like that. So now I would put dollars to donuts that it's actually modeled on. Okay, let's create a female character like that and see how it goes.
Right.
All kinds of opportunities to learn forgiveness in the world.
Indeed, judgments. Oh boy. I just offered to share 3 worksheets that I had done. I did that on Dr. Tim's hour, and because he had said, well, I think that doing more worksheets on the show would really be valuable. So I had these 3 different worksheets come up, one behind the other, and I shared them, and the blaring and blatant truth that I kept seeing about myself is my incredible ability to judge other people negatively. It's like, wow, and it's really strange because I'm not aware of it in my own mind generally about, like people often think something that they don't say out loud. I'm often not aware that I've made the judgment. I've kept it out of my own awareness. But anyway.
Can I make an offering?
Oh, absolutely.
Can I make an offering on that one that might take things to the next level?
Okay.
I don't believe you've ever judged anybody negatively, ever in your whole life. I do believe that perhaps there's content in your mind, modeled probably upon a power person, that allows your mind to construct perceptions that are based on judgments. But the whole process is still internal. Go back to the thought from the Course. Thoughts never leave their source. And and I'm just realizing this now for me, is that even saying, I'm judging them, the truth is it's just another projection of my mind. I'm not judging them at all. It's still a totally internal process that I'm in charge of and can change. And it's kind of a form of denial to say, oh yeah, so I'm judging that out there, when the only thing I'm seeing when I'm in any form of hostility or fear is a construct of my own mind. Totally internal, and we just name it that it's about something else, but the truth is it's still right there inside of us. And to me, that's like the really, really good news. There's another thought in the Course that says, you think this is outside of you. If it were outside of you, you'd really be in trouble. Fortunately, it's inside of you, and that's good news.
I think that is a wonderful and astute observation. Thank you. I'm going to go back and look at these particular 3 worksheets and see how it was me that I was actually talking about.
And as you do that, my offering would be, and of course this is an offering for everybody, my offering would be that on the level where we think of the body as physical, each new level that you get to with those worksheets will be another level of quote-unquote physical healing for you.
I welcome that, yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm. Thank you for opening this conversation. I'm with you 100%, because I'm, that applies for all of us. To keep cleaning it up on the next level and the next level and the next level.
Right.
Such a gift.
Speaking of the physical,
say it again.
Speaking of the physical level, I wonder if you or Jeanie have any comments or recommendations. I have been experiencing a rash on my face in different blotchy places, on my chin, around my nose, blah, blah, coming and going for a number of years, and more coming than going these days. And I just finally went to a dermatologist, and of course, he gave me what would suppress it.
Steroids.
Which is what I knew and why I have put it off all this time. It's just that it's become kind of unbearable to walk around with this on my face. So,
I hear you. Been there.
What is it? Yeah, what is it that I need to be looking at here? Go ahead. I'll stop
You
talking.
probably recall me mentioning this on shows. I've done it maybe two or three times over the years of the shows, and I suspect probably you've been listening to it when I've talked about it, so this will be mostly a reminder. But back in the early days of doing this work, and I would do a lot of physiological detoxing programs, and I started to get a red blotch on each of my cheeks, which then, and this was right about the time, I'd been doing things locally in Fort Lauderdale. It was when things were starting to pick up and I was being invited to different parts of the country. So here I am, getting on a plane and going to Detroit or going to somewhere in California, wherever. And I've got these two red running sores that are about the size of a silver dollar on each of my cheeks.
Mm.
And I had a friend who said, Michael, you got to do something about that. That's a medical problem. I was like, well, okay, but I don't believe it is. I'm detoxing. I realize, cheeks relate to lungs specifically, and that's where I was doing my work with my lungs. That's been my perennial challenge. And he said, well, I've got a friend. I talked to him. He's a dermatologist, and I'll pay for it. Just go see him and see what he says. So I went to see his dermatologist friend. His friend looked at it. I said, well, we can just give you a little steroid and boom, 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 and give a little cream. That'll be gone in no time. I said, well, what about the fact that, my body's releasing something, and what a steroid does is suppress it, shut it back in. It's like kind of like putting a cork in the plumbing line, the drain on the toilet. Well, I don't know anything about that, but I know how to get rid of it. And I just said, thanks, I'll pass. And that went on. I mean, I had these big, and they were pretty nasty, pretty ugly looking, red running sores on each of my cheeks for probably, I don't even remember now because this was in the really early days, but it was at least a year.
Mm-hmm.
And once my body worked through it, that was it. It was done. It was gone. And I don't know if you were listening to the show yesterday, but we were talking with Susan about, skin, and at least in the naturopathic system, skin is seen when there's an eruption as a reflection of some sort of part of the colon that isn't working properly, the reflex points. And if the colon is not doing its job fully, then the skin, as an eliminative organ, is kind of a backup and takes over. So it might be good to just do a general colon cleanse type of thing and just see if that shifts and or moves anything that needs to be moved there.
Oh. Well, interesting, because I've been doing, I haven't done a colon cleanse in a long time in the sense of taking any herbs or anything like that for it.
Right.
But I've been, for months during the summer and early autumn, I have been going like once a week to have a colonic, water
Right.
colonic. And then I was also doing coffee enemas almost every day. So,
That's powerful.
Yeah. And that's what I really attributed this to was, okay, my body's just cleansing, and so this is coming out in the skin, but it's still coming out,
Well,
I'm not sure.
Then my next suggestion would be is get the book that I mentioned yesterday, Tissue Cleansing Through Bowel Management by Bernard Jensen. And in it, he lays out, a lot of information about the colon, and then he lays out several different colon cleanses, one of them being a Kalima process. I would think you'd probably heard us talk about that in the past. Jack, actually, I had a clean board that Jack borrowed before he passed, and he was doing that cleanse program. So I don't have that board anymore, but you might want to look at that. And here's what I've seen. Again, in the early days of doing this, I used to guide people through the Kalima process. And I've literally seen things come out of people's colons that, you're driving along the highway and a truck in front of you has a piece of tire retread peel off and end up on the road. If you get out and pick it up, it's hard. I mean, literally that in the colon. And according to the man who sourced the Kalima process, his name is V.E. Irons, the last time I saw him, he was 82 and introduced his newborn baby to the audience he was speaking at. I was speaking at a conference, and he was also speaking at that conference. But according to him, that having been really his specialty study, it takes a certain combination of herbs to start to break that kind of impacted material down. And virtually anybody that's ever eaten the SAD diet, which sadly I include myself, because it was a long time in my early life that I didn't know any better until I started studying nutrition and medicine. But that it takes a certain combination of herbs, and they put out a specialty product. You can look up, I assume they're still out there, I haven't dealt with them in years, but VE Irons Company, or you can order.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I actually bought the whole kit years ago. I mean, a lot of years ago, that Irons had put out, and utilized it with 10-day. I think that's actually when I was introduced to the coffee enema. It was through that process. Right. And yeah, so I'm going to look and see if I can get a hold of that. That was very, very beneficial.
I would suggest you might want to do it get a Kalima board and do the full program, because what I hear you saying, especially if it's just coming up on your face, it's very localized, and at least according to that theory, not saying this is what's going on, but at least according to that theory, that would say there's probably a pocket or pockets in your colon related to the skin as an limit organ on the face, and so that's where it's coming out. If it were a different place in the colon, it might be coming out in the in the arm, or it might come out in the the back, or leg, or whatever. But wherever there are eruptions of any kind, that system at least sees it as a reflection of that. And to get into, if there are pockets, oftentimes pockets in the colon, one of the things that used to, or happens when you do that deeper cleanse, is people will get what we used to call an intestinal bullet. And that was that a pocket of toxicity would be kind of closed around the body. To protect itself, would close around it, and it would create a pressure pocket. And once the layers of impacted material were peeled off top of it, it would literally shoot out. It would be like it had ballooned out with that toxicity, and when the surface broke through, it would literally shoot and hit the other side of the colon and hurt like an intestinal bullet. So there can be localized things like that if you go deep enough, they're going to open up and you're going to get rid of them.
Okay,
and then,
super.
Again,
I'm
we'll
going to
turn
look for that.
Yeah, cool.
That is wonderful. Good information and good reminder of long ago and very successful stuff. So I'm going to need to ring off now and listen.
Okay.
And it's been a Happy New Year again.
Oh, thank you. Same to you.
Yeah.
One other quick thought as you go would be to on the mental level would be to be, and it may tie into those 3 worksheets. That's why this whole conversation's opened up. Would be, what kind of things have you not been wanting to face?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So that may just be another piece of the puzzle that gets the whole thing to pop open, and you get another level of quote unquote physical healing. Yay.
Very, very, very good. And when you asked that question, I know you weren't looking for an answer, but I got one immediately. In one of my worksheets recently came up the idea that a punishment thought I had was that some people would get assassinated so that they would just not be any problem anymore. How about that?
Yeah.
How about that one?
I hear you.
That was a surprise. So, yeah, I think things like that.
Healing vengeance thoughts. How many of us had a power person that we listened to their vengeance conversations? And perhaps on occasion they were turned on us. And so it becomes, that power person dynamic, the field opens and that energy is taken in, and reopening and embracing that can be a pretty deeply traumatic moment, because that level of intensity and that type of thought certainly takes us far away from the innocence of the 4-year-old as we can get.
Yes, indeed, it does. Thank you for bringing up the power person aspect of it. I have a feeling there's something very valuable in that. Yeah. Okay, thanks again.
Right. Well, you have a blessed one.
Indeed, and to you as well. I will listen to the rest of the show. Thank you.
Cool. Have the best year yet of your eternal life. And speaking of eternal life, as I was dialing in, and before I dialed in, thinking about what I was going to talk about today, the biggest thing that kept coming was just the joy of the fact that we get to have a human life. It's like so amazing. Of course, enhanced when we have someone like these little ones around at 4, and seeing the sweetness and the innocence that's there, but knowing that we can all reclaim that that's in all of us, that's our natural state. And as you do your work, as each of us does our work, we get closer and closer to being able to really, truly be in that state before we were kicked out of innocence, before we were kicked out of total awareness of functioning as and in an energy field called love. It's wordless, the sweetness, while so much of the world is doing this crazy stuff that's going on, just tune into the news and look at the insanity that's going on. And the terrorism, the just stark raving terrorism, especially recently, the terrorism that passes as politics. And what we have, as a community, devolved to. So just reaffirming that the opportunity that comes with this work, if one chooses to go to the deepest levels, includes being able to bring back that sweetness and presence to our own physiology, to our own minds, to our own relationships, and then to extend that out beyond our homes to those around us that we touch. We haven't been out too much since the holidays, but just for me, and being out and just looking at another person that I don't know from Adam's cat, and being able to hold that space and be that space with them is just such an awesome gift, I think. When I think about the mind that I used to run around the world with. So thank you for sharing this journey with us. And our call-in number, if you're on one of those stations where we cannot see you, is 563-999-3581. If you call that number, you'll be listening to the show. And then if you have a thought, a question, something to share with us, push 1. That raises a hand in the control panel, and we'll be having a conversation. And our objective is to have a conversation with you. How can we support you? What's on your mind? Is there anything going on in your life that needs a little extra oomph and support, bring you through it? How can we refine the tools? One of the things to understand, and I've been talking about this more lately, bringing it back around again, but it deserves repeating often, I think, is that there's no point at which you can separate your mind from your body, or what you call your body. They're just reflections of each other, and they are mental constructs. The mind and the body are mental constructs based upon a singular experience that you call your life. in the same way that if I took a silver dollar, I say there's a head and there's a tail, but I can't take the head of the coin off of the coin. I can't separate it because there isn't a head or a tail on the coin. There isn't a picture of George Washington and an eagle on the other side. There isn't. There is a singular event with two different perspectives. And I think that the coin analogy helps to understand that that's exactly what my so-called body and mind are. We look at it from one point of view and we go, oh, my thoughts, but my thoughts don't, it doesn't matter what I think. Excuse me? The reflection of your thoughts is your physiology. The reflection of your thoughts are the constructs of your mind. And there's no way to get away from that. You know, I can remember in Churchianity, I used to hear this idea, and it was presented as, you know, God's going to get you because God knows your most secret thoughts. God can go, you can't hide. Like, well, no, that's right, you can't hide. Your physiology and your mind are one and the same. And whatever you do to one reflects on the other, even if your mind is telling you you're doing it to someone else. How did that old saying go? Make sure your words are gentle, you may have to eat them someday. Well, you're eating them every day. Every day. Especially the ones with the emotional energy behind them. And oftentimes our wounds come from genetically inherited thoughts, genetically inherited traumas, and oftentimes multi-generational assaults that store unresolved pain. And when we hold those energetic dynamics that powerfully, those things result in repeated experiences. And those repeated traumatic experiences are what obscure the subtle, permanently available experience of your true nature, of that sweet presence of love. You know, especially if you're in the male gender in today's world, all the tough guy stuff we've been given, all the macho baloney that literally kills men 10 years before women, if you look at their age or life expectancy. So if your mind is presenting reasons why you should be in upset, pretending those reasons are outside of you, just note that your mind is lying to you. It's not telling you the truth. Your mind is your so-called body, and your perception is a construct that tells you first and foremost about the content of that mind-body unit, not about the world that you think you're looking at. That was kind of the point that Magda opened so beautifully with her worksheets. And I really appreciate the thought from Course in Miracles that says, thoughts never leave their source. And if you think you can assault someone else mentally, physically, emotionally, verbally, financially, then recognize that it all comes home to roost. The energy dynamics keep an exact score and an exact record. And if the scorekeeping you're doing is based in anything other than yourself and those around you as the presence of love, you know, even the one that you could say is the most offensive, can you take the person who is the ultimate offender and it doesn't mean approve of what they're doing. In fact, be your role to hold them accountable for what they're doing, which someone might see as vengeance. But done with a heart connected to love, Can you embrace that ultimate offender? Can you hold to that space? I was doing some processing with someone this is a couple of months ago. And, I keep politics out of the show, but I do on my Facebook page work to educate people and keep in front of us for the purpose of recognizing if we're going to have a world for our grandkids to grow up in, our kids' kids and their kids to grow up in, we're going to have to hold people accountable for what's going on. And this particular person said, well, that's not very loving. Like, well, actually, you'll notice that on occasion, one of the things I'll post is a picture of that person that I've said needs to be held accountable for this really horrific behavior. And I post it with the commitment from this work and extending love in their direction. Ultimate offender in my life, whoever that is, and hold them in that space in my heart. If I can't, it's because I don't have space in my heart, and I'm the one with the problem. They're not. Oh yeah, what they did may be absolutely horrendous, horrific, illegal, immoral, despicable, disgusting, all the horrific adjectives you could put on it. And if I don't have room to embrace them in the presence of my love, it's because there's something in me that's blocking me from doing that. And that's the next level of my work. And to remember in the context of all of that, that behind all of it, permanent, is the truth of who we are as human beings, is the presence of love. You'll remember the Course in Miracles says you need not seek for love. You need only seek, find, and release the barriers you built within yourself against it. And so everything that flares up in emotional pain or trauma isn't about anybody or anything that's happening in the world. Yes, that content, we can construct perceptions out of it and project that content into our perception of someone else and believe that we're actually looking at someone else when we're looking at this picture of a body made up by our minds, a body that doesn't even exist in the actual world. That's all projection. And what forgiveness does, if you remember, is it collapses projection. And if one is blocked in the awareness of self as love, that's something that's never imposed from the outside. It's always 100% of the time an inside job. It's a wonderful piece of music that we've played, or we often play in intensives. If you've been at one, you'll probably remember Alanis Morissette singing the song Madness, and her insight that, yes, when you're in the room, my madness comes up, and I can pretend that it's all about you. But the insight line of her song, obviously she's done some really serious work to get to this, is to recognize that my hurt, my pain, my disturbance, my upset is still moving in me when you're not in the room. And I can miss this opportunity to heal myself by blaming you, but that's all that I'll do by blaming another. And, there is clearly a one-world religion, and it's the religion of blame. And just about every one of us was born into it. Learning to blame. Now, projection. We've recognized with Aria, she has this little character on the end of her hand that she uses her fingers like a puppet. It's called Sean. And it's really wonderful to watch her as she projects onto Sean those things that she's working on in her mind, that she's working through. And the lecture she gives to Sean to straighten him out, it's so clear she's processing things in her own mind, in her own way of arriving back at the presence of love. Do a search on YouTube or wherever for the song Madness by Alanis Morissette. She says it so poetically and so beautifully. She has an awesome voice. And when you recognize that all perception is autobiographical. All perception tells us about the mind that is experiencing the perception. There's an interesting quote that comes from a man named George Washington Carver. And I don't remember offhand, I haven't looked at anything about him for some time, but he was a black man in the South back in the, I don't remember, it was the early 1900s, late 1800s. So you can imagine life was pretty heavy duty. But this man was so attuned to this in such a genius way. I will never allow a man to so defile my soul so as to cause me to hate him. Now, of course, the insight from Carver at that moment is he knows who he is, and nobody's going to take that away from him, whatever they do to his body. Carl Jung explains it. He describes the avoidable cause of repeated painful experiences when he says, what is rejected from the self appears in the world, and you could put in brackets the word world there. You could put perception. Appears in the world as an event. We meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the pathway of life. And then he describes the exact solution that Yeshua provided 2,000 years ago when he says, and again, this is a quote from Carl Jung, probably the greatest, or one of the greatest psychologists, psychiatrists of all time, until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct our lives and we will call it fate. And the defenses that the mind has to avoid those internal things that we're in denial of are just monumental. The styles, the types of avoidance, the stories we can make up that allow us to pretend that somebody else is the causes of what's going on inside of us. Amazing. We've watched time after time in intensives, for instance, and one presents a defense against a particular truth. And when that defense is proven illogical, they'll come up with another explosion, one that perhaps parallels their first excuse, but is slightly different. And when that defense is shot down, that defense is pointed out to be error, then still another and another and another. And there are times, and many of you have been there, where it actually becomes quite humorous, because it's clear the person who's telling these stories has no awareness that the first story they told to pretend they had nothing to do with what it was they were dealing with was the exact opposite of the last story they told. After 20 minutes of beating around the bush and making up story, here's what I really meant. No, well, this is what it really is. Well, this is, but here's what what's really happening. And it actually becomes quite humorous to those who are observing, because it's so obvious, except to the person whose mind is doing it. So the defenses become quite humorous, although the destructive aspect of them can be pretty horrendous. So how do we make the unconscious conscious? Well, there are many teachers who fall into a method of doing that. In fact, there's several times on the show in the past, Dr. Tim has shared one of the things that attracted him to this work is that over the years he had gone to different trainings by this famous psychologist or that famous psychologist, he being a clinical psychologist, to learn the skill that this person had that just produced these fabulous results. But what he found was, most often for himself and his friends who were also psychologists, is they couldn't reproduce what this great psychologist was doing. Like the psychologist would hold a teaching, a training, but wouldn't be able to transfer the information that empowered those who were in the training to do the same thing. That was his, in essence, what he says, like we looked and we studied and he told us all about it, or she told us all about it, but none of us could do it. And the thing that attracted him to this work is that he could take a worksheet and offer it to anybody with zero skills, and if they would do the steps, they could produce the same result as he or I or Jeanie or anybody else could. That it's a universally transferable tool, and to me, that's due to the genius of the man who initiated it, which is Yeshua 2,000 years ago. I feel so blessed to have gotten to get back into or to work with a group of people who were some of the world's top Aramicists and purposely spent time working to establish the first century meanings of the words of Yeshua so that we could accurately understand what he had to say. And then, once the translators, there were 25 different ones, once the translators agreed on that translation, it still wasn't verified as an accurate translation until it was taken into the laboratory of the classroom and would produce the results that it purported to produce. That was basically, I was not a translator, I don't read, write, or speak the language, but my part in the process was to take it into the laboratory of the classroom and say, does this work? And only then, when Dan McDougall was guiding the translation work back at that point, he was a top attorney in Atlanta, and turned his attention and his creativity. Here's the kind of mind Dan had. He was in the Navy during World War II, and when they did IQ tests in the Navy, he was the number 4 scorer on the IQ test in the Navy, the whole of the men they tested in the Navy. And until it produced the result in the classroom, it wasn't considered a verified translation. So how do we make the unconscious conscious? There's a reliable, simple tool, not simple until you understand it, but it's pretty simple, for breaking down this barrier between the subconscious and the unconscious, for breaking down what they call the veil of the temple. You'll remember they said the veil of the temple must be rent in twain, torn in two, and that wasn't about a purple curtain in the church. That was the veil, the barrier that was built through denial, through holding the breath, and through hiding from ourselves the truth. Everybody who's joined the one world religion of blame, and it's virtually everybody that I've ever met in my life, has, in the presence of any kind of traumatic energy, held their breath and literally locked that energy into tissue. Created an artificial veil that creates an artificial condition of the mind that we call the unconscious. And how far along is that in the world today? Well, if you listen to psychologists that specialize in such things, they'll tell us that 90, perhaps 95, and maybe even as much as 98% of the average person's thinking is unconscious. Now, if that's accurate, if we're living on top of a 98% dissociation rate, what kind of things are we going to have to open and embrace? And here's why people keep making up their stories. They'll make up any kind of crap. Once their mind presents them with a construct, they'll make up anything. I mean, total, complete fabrication. I remember I was up in Toronto, Canada, and was doing a workshop on creating consciously, and we were working on a mind shifter, and people were reading the mind shifter out loud. And I don't remember exactly what it was at this point, but they went around the room and different people were reading it, just giving it their inflection. And one, if I remember correctly, I believe it was a woman, one woman read it, and she added, I don't remember if it was a word or two words to it that weren't there. And so I asked her to read it again, and she looked at the page very carefully and read it. And she added, again, I don't remember if it was a word or two words that weren't there. And so I asked her to read it again, and she took her finger and pointed to the words on the page as she read them, and she read two words that weren't there. That's how tricky, that's how this state of hypnosis can take us over and have us see things that never happened. And we make up all kinds of crap to justify a reality that we're attached to keeping integrated. And if that reality is based in some form of hostility or fear, we're in trouble. So when one knows how to consistently, persistently open the veil of the temple, that barrier between the subconscious and the unconscious, there's the opportunity to remove those assault energies that have been building up in the average person's bloodline for generation upon generation upon generation upon generation. And 2,000 years ago, Yeshua offered, here's how it's done. Once I made contact with here's how it's done, I spent 35 years full-time working to understand it and be able to explain it. And that's where the forgiveness, the reality management worksheet came from, is to work toward understanding how to collapse the perceptual mind that tells us these stories, internal dynamics projected into pictures of what we think are other people, how to collapse those projections, and in so doing drop directly into the underlying generationally instilled trauma, and then usually reinforced within the family or the community system. This genius mind that showed us that the key to it is your perceptual constructs, however pained, are mustered, are activated, are set into activity by the goals that you hold. And when you cancel a goal, that goal canceled collapses that pained perception. Underneath it, in the unconscious, is that pain. And when it collapses, you get to access what's underneath it. And that's why most people don't ever want to go there. And that's why anybody who wants to heal must There's no second question, no chance, no changes about it. Must go to that place and clean up that part of their physiology and their minds. So that's what we're here to support. We're down to the last few seconds, so the show's going to cut us off, even though I don't have anybody out there that I'm talking to specifically at this point. I've stretched it out to the last second, so I'm going to just thank you all for joining us and create the best year yet of your